The Dread Wringer. Is the only new bucket added to Splatoon 3 trash or treasure? I am once again fashionably late to making a video on this, considering the weapon came out over a year ago. However, in my defense, I was a bit put off from working on this series after making the Big Swig video, since that weapon ended up getting 7 different buffs since it released at the start of 2023. So no, I'm not late, I was just giving the developers time to cook. And in that time, they gave it a grand total of 2 buffs. One was to reduce how much ink it used, allowing it to have 11 shots instead of 10, and the other made its ink distance while jumping a tiny bit longer because apparently it was broken this entire time and they just forgot to fix it. The other reason I waited so long was to see what the second kit would be, since oftentimes that can make or break the main weapon in terms of performance. Unfortunately, the second kit for the Dread was definitely a downgrade, giving it beacons and wavebreaker, neither of which are all that useful in helping this weapon function better on its own, and we're not getting third kits. Now, I know there's probably some competitive tryhard player who has made it to the top 500X rank using the D version of the Dread, but what I want to know is, for the average player, where does this weapon stand? Is it a hidden treasure that we've all overlooked, or does it belong in the dump with all the other low-tier, hard-to-use weapons? Hey, what's the Clash Blaster doing over there? Answering this question is a bit difficult at times, especially since I haven't made one of these in like a year, but thankfully I got a nice reminder of what makes something an absolute treasure thanks to today's sponsor, Witchspring R. And I'm betting it's a gem you haven't heard of. Witchspring R is a very cute story-driven RPG that has a rich collection and crafting system, along with some strategic turn-based battles. You can also collect over 20 different pets, some of which will help you navigate the map and take down enemies in battle. If you are a more combat-oriented player, you can opt in for the harder difficulty modes and build Pieberry, which is the cutest main character name ever, to a playstyle that best suits your preference. Or you can take things easy and focus on the story, which is what makes this game an absolute gem. It's impressive so many people that literally almost every review it's gotten on Steam mentions how good the story is. The game also has a bunch of quality of life features like quick travel and allowing you to literally pick your battles. Most of them are skippable. You can also use quick hunt to easily swipe through weaker enemies, and your companions like Black Joe will also help you with gathering crafting materials. That way you can focus on building Pieberry into one powerful witch, and experience the heartwarming story without having to waste hours on grinding. This game's been out on Steam for about a year now, but I'm excited to announce that it recently came out for both the Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 5, so you can experience this wonderful game on either PC or console. To learn more about this hidden gem of a game, click the link in the description or pinned comment down below. It's a great way to support the channel. And now that I've reminded myself what treasure looks like, let's get back to the Dread. How the Dread works. Although it is a bucket type weapon, the Dread best fits within the Slosher subcategory, since the paint it throws out falls more like a blanket and not a projectile. See how there's a bit of falloff damage? That's because it's a blanket. Meaning the 2 buckets most similar to the Dread are the Slosher with its 1 ink blanket and the Tri-Slosher with its 3 ink blankets. The Dread has 2 ink blankets? Does that mean they could have called it the Bi-Slosher instead? Anyways, in terms of performance, this bucket can be fired a total of 11 times per ink tank, and it sloshes at around 1 slosh per second. It's about the same speed as the Mono Slosher, which can be fired 13 times but takes 12 seconds to empty out, meaning that the original sloshers are just a few frames faster. But neither of them can stand up to the Tri, which can be sloshed 17 times and can basically fire twice per second. Although in terms of range, the Dread has both of its predecessors beat. It's even got more range than the sloshing machine. Overall, the Dread works like a slightly better slosher since it's got a bit more range, roughly the same speed, and a bit more damage, sort of. Unlike the OG Slosher that gives you 1 nice blanket of ink, the Dread comes with 2. It's not all that visible when you're firing it head on, but if you turn while firing, you'll see exactly what I mean. 1 Slosher blanket does 70 damage flat, but 1 wet blanket from the Dread does only about 45. Technically, the first one does 48 and the second 42, together they do 90. That means that if you're sloshing at an enemy that is coming directly at you, the Dread will do more damage, but if the enemy's moving sideways, chances are you'll only be doing about 40. This also means if you're fighting the Dread, to never face them head on. If you take the time to really master this weapon, you can learn how to properly time your curve shots so that both of them can hit a moving enemy, but most of us have skill issues issues, so I'll have to dock the Dread for this one. Anyways, let's look at this weapon's best gear abilities. While looking into what to run, I decided to check out Sandu Inc. since there's a lot of data on what other players tend to run on this weapon, and I do love me data. To my surprise, the majority of builds involved comeback, stealth jump, and a whole load of quick respawn, which kinda confused me because this is what I'd expect to see on a Slayer build. But it kinda did tell me that most people tend to take a more offensive approach with this weapon. One ability which I did not see used very much on Sandu that I think is actually extremely useful for this weapon and this weapon only is Thermo Ink. That's because if either one of your 2 shots hits a moving enemy, you'll be able to see where they are for the next 15 seconds. Sure, it's not as good as Han's infinite vision, but I've had too many situations where I hit someone once and then they back away with their ninja squid shenanigans, but as soon as they pop out of their ink, I can see exactly where they are and then finish them off. Comeback is definitely a good pick since it gives you the equivalent of 1 main of special charge, movement, and ink efficiency, all of which really benefit the Dread. Stealth jump is almost a must-have since this weapon is a bit slow with its movement, so it's much better to just jump in if possible. I guess the beacons from the second kit could be used for jumping in safely too, but a bomb that can take care of jumpers or distant enemies is much more useful in my opinion. As far as sub-slots go, I personally would use Special Saver, especially with how easy it is for the Reef Slider to get cancelled. There's also a bunch of times where I got splatted moments before I had my special fully charged, so it would be nice to respawn with most of that still ready to go. If you're running stealth jump so you can hop back into battle, you might also want to slap that 1 sub-slot of jump speed, and for the rest, I'd actually go with Special Charge. I know Comeback gives you 1 main of Special Charge, which is nice and all, but you do have to get splatted for that to work. I would definitely recommend you have some extra Special Charge on hand since having the Reef Slider ready to go proved to be extremely useful. And now that we've covered how this weapon works, it's time to ask the main question. The Dread Wringer, is it trash or treasure? To find out, I decided to take this weapon into each of the different multiplayer modes and do a best out of 5 to determine how it performs. And since there's 5 modes, if it can be useful in at least 3 out of 5 of them, I'd say that it is in fact a treasure. Now let's start off with my favorite mode, the Rainmaker. One of my biggest worries going in was that this weapon is kind of slow, but thankfully it is just fast enough to stop some major pushes and knockouts from happening. I think it helps that the ink blanket will cover the podium so it can easily stop a push in its steps. Unfortunately, the slow sloshing speed did end up being a problem when going up against the Rainmaker directly. I felt like I could only get 1 attack in before having to run for my life, and sadly 1 attack doesn't do enough damage to stop the push. I was also getting easily countered by the fast shooting close range weapons like the Undercover Umbrella, Rollers, and that darn Tri-Slosher, and that was problematic since they tend to lurk around the Rainmaker when it's trying to push. However, it wasn't all that bad. Since this weapon has some pretty decent range and power to it, I could easily take care of or at least intimidate enemies who are waiting to ambush us from various high grounds or perches. This made it easier to act as a bodyguard when my own team was trying to make a push. It also made it easier to safeguard areas that enemies could try to use as flanks. Even though I couldn't one-shot any of them, it was enough to scare them away or fumble their plans. And as luck would have it, I won 3 out of 5 Rainmaker games, getting the Dread its first major win. Next up was Tower Control. Although I got a nice win on my first tower game, I definitely noticed that the Dread is one of those weapons that aren't meant to be on the tower. That's because even though I have plenty of range to keep approaching enemies at bay, I can only easily protect the tower from one direction, and if an enemy decided to hop on an attack, there's nothing my 2-shot slow bucket could do. In matches 2 and 3, the enemy teams were very aggressive, and while I could stop a few pushes at choke points here and there, the Dread was definitely having a hard time against longer ranged weapons like the E-Leader and the protective specials like Big Bubbler, giving me 2 losses back to back. My struggles carried on to match 4, where it was very apparent that this weapon is not meant to handle one-on-one battles against any weapon. It was so slow that it's a sitting duck against most specials as well, but we managed to pull off a win by stopping the tower moments before losing the lead, and I even managed to be silly for long enough to distract their charger and splatling while we regained control of the map, so there was still hope. I put all of my learning to use in the final match by attacking the ambush points from a distance and using my special to scatter opponents near the tower. This allowed my team to score some major points, and from there it was a game of defense, and by that I mean the best defense, which is a lot of offense. I kept playing onto the Dread's strong suits of distant attacks to crowd control and reef sliding into their DMs. It helped me land a final victory needed to score the second point for the Dread. Splat zones. Things were looking good for the Dread, but now it was time to see how well this bucket does when the objective isn't always moving around. In the first match, I instantly felt locked into base thanks to the enemy's long-range special spam, but I could easily counter it with a timely re-slider. I also wasn't too sure where to stand with this weapon. Do I hang out in mid? Do I push forward to apply pressure? Try to flank maybe? Not sure if it was my awkwardness, panic, or just the overall stronger enemy team, but we failed to maintain momentum and lost the first game pretty fast. I was still unsure of my positioning during the second match, but it was a lot easier to focus on attacking enemies trying to approach from the ambush spots and drops. I also had more access to high ground and spots where I could hide, but also I haven't played on this map too much, as you can tell by the fact that I accidentally walked off the stage. Although I did not make the same mistake twice and managed to be an actually decent teammate the second time around. I also picked up another useful tactic for the Dread, which is to aggro enemies chasing you down and then finish them off before they can reach you. Bonus points if you have the Reef Slider ready to go. Either way, I managed to get another win for the Dread, earning it the 3 major points needed to say that this weapon is indeed a hidden treasure. I still tried it out in clams and turf anyways, and the only mode where the Dread did not manage to secure a victory was Turf War. I think that's in part due to the fact that this weapon is very slow at splatting enemies, and if they aren't focused on a specific target like in the ranked modes, it becomes a lot harder to pull off a win and attack them while they're distracted. I did get to test this theory out by using it during the Grand Fest, and it did really well in Tricolor, although it definitely was not as useful as say a roller. Either way, if you've made it this far and are gonna try out the dual bucket, here's some important tips to remember. This is a slow 2-shot weapon with quite a bit of range. It is best used to support your teammates from the side or to protect the objective by targeting enemies that might be coming in from various ambush points or drops. It is a pretty ink-hungry weapon, so either stack a bunch of main saver on it or be very methodical on where and when you attack. This is also one of the few, if not the only, weapon in the game that actually benefits from thermal ink, so if you want to experience how that ability is actually supposed to work, give this weapon a try. You won't dread it. And that's about it. The Dread Wringer is indeed a hidden treasure of a weapon that most people should be fine using. It may take a few matches to warm up and get used to its more unique playstyle, but it is friendly enough that most players should be able to enjoy it. And if you've enjoyed this style of video and you would like to see me make more of these before the next game comes out, leave me a comment down below with which Splatoon 3 weapon you'd like to see me cover next. Or, you know, just what you thought about the Dread or any tips that I might have missed. Either way, thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed, check out that sponsor, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!